What would you do if you owned a $380 million hotel chain, walked into your own lobby, and got thrown out by your own con staff because of the clothes you were wearing? Most people will never face that moment. But one man did. And what happened next did not just change his hotel, it changed everyone who was watching. They laughed at him. They whispered behind his back. They called security. They escorted him out like a criminal. And the whole time he said nothing. He just watched. He remembered every face, every smirk, every phone raised to record his humiliation. 20 minutes later, he walked back in. And this time, nobody was laughing. This is that story. It was a Thursday evening, 9:17 to be exact. When Keanu pushed through the revolving doors of the Grand View Hotel, he wore a faded black hoodie that had lost its color years ago. His jeans carried dust from a long walk through downtown. His brown leather boots were scuffed at the toes and worn at the heels. A canvas backpack hung loosely over one shoulder, frayed at the edges like something that had traveled too many miles. He did not look like a man about to check into a $2,000 a night penthouse suite. He looked like someone the world had already decided to overlook. And that was exactly what he wanted. 2 days before this moment, Keanu had quietly completed one of the largest hospitality acquisitions in recent memory. Through a private equity fund registered under a name no journalist could trace. He purchased the entire Grand View hotel chain, 11 properties across the country, $380 million. Not a single press release. Not one internal memo. His assistant, a woman named Lisa Palmer, who had worked with him for 12 years, handled the reservation herself. Penthouse suite, 3 nights booked under a foundation name with no public connection to his identity. She had asked him once why he insisted on doing this. Why not just send an inspector? Keanu had answered simply, "Reports tell you what people want you to see. I need to see what they hide." He had learned this lesson the hard way years ago when he discovered that a property he trusted was quietly mistreating staff while sending him glowing performance reviews. Since then, he made it a practice. Walk in unannounced. Walk in unrecognized. Walk in as someone the system considered unimportant. Because if a place treated people poorly when it thought nobody was watching, then that place was broken at its core. No amount of renovation could fix a culture that had learned to sort human beings by the clothes on their backs. Tonight he would find out exactly how broken the Grand View had become. The lobby stretched before him like a temple dedicated to wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, casting warm golden light across white marble floors. The air carried the scent of expensive flowers and aged leather. Somewhere near the bar, a grand piano played softly, its notes floating through the space like a gentle reminder that this was a place for certain kinds of people. Everything about the Grand View whispered exclusivity. Everything except the man who had just walked in. The moment Keanu crossed the threshold, the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first, like a temperature drop you feel before you see the storm clouds. Conversations did not stop, but they softened. Heads did not snap around, but they turned slowly, deliberately, the way people do when they want to observe without being caught observing. An older gentleman, seated near the fireplace, lowered his newspaper. He wore a navy blazer with gold buttons and a Rolex that caught the chandelier light. He studied Keanu for a moment. Then raised one eyebrow in a gesture that communicated everything without saying a word. 2 women at the cocktail bar leaned toward each other. Their whispers were followed by a small laugh, the kind that was not quite hidden because it was not meant to be hidden. One of them raised her phone slightly, angling it toward the lobby entrance. A man in a perfectly tailored vest nudged his companion and smirked, shaking his head slowly as if watching something mildly amusing that had wandered into the wrong neighborhood. Nobody spoke directly to Keanu. They did not need to. The message arrived through 100 small gestures, through turned shoulders and avoided eye contact, through smirks exchanged between strangers who suddenly found common ground in their shared judgment. You do not belong here. Everyone knows it, including you. Keanu kept walking, steady, unhurried. His worn boots made soft sounds against the marble with each step. He had felt this before. Not at film premieres, where everyone smiled regardless of what they thought. Not at industry parties where politeness was currency. He had felt this in the real world, the world that decided your value before you ever opened your mouth. He let his eyes move across the room, taking in every glance, every whispered judgment. His expression remained calm, almost peaceful. He was not angry. He was not embarrassed. He was collecting evidence. A young man stood behind the reception desk. His name tag read Daniel Cooper. He looked about 24 years old, clean-cut with short brown hair and blue eyes that held the nervous energy of someone still learning how the world worked. His black suit was pressed, his tie was straight, but his face betrayed uncertainty as he watched Keanu approach. Daniel had seen guests turned away before. He had watched Margaret handle situations with cold efficiency. But something about this felt different. Something about the way this man walked. The way he held himself. The way his eyes seemed to absorb everything without reacting to anything. Daniel opened his mouth to offer a greeting, but before the first word could leave his lips, a voice cut through the air like a blade. This area is reserved for guests with confirmed reservations. The voice belonged to Margaret Thornton, and in the 7 years she had served as general manager of the Grand View, that voice had become law within these walls. She emerged from the side hallway with the precision of someone who had made this entrance 1,000 times. Silver hair pulled into a tight bun, a black blazer over a white silk blouse, pearl earrings that caught the light, eyes the color of winter steel. She looked at Keanu for exactly 1 second, head to toe. In that single second, she assessed the fabric of his clothes, the condition of his shoes, his posture, his grooming, and assigned him a value. The assessment was not favorable. "I have a reservation," Keanu said, his voice calm and even. Under Reeves' foundation, Margaret did not look at the computer screen. Did not ask Daniel to check. Did not show any indication that she was willing to verify. She simply tilted her head at an angle that suggested she was examining something distasteful and offered a smile that never reached her eyes. "I am afraid you have the wrong address. We do not accept walk-ins." "I am not a walk-in," Keanu replied, his tone unchanged. "Penthouse suite. 3 nights. If you would be kind enough to check the system." Margaret did not move. Her arms folded across her chest like a barrier. Behind her, Daniel's fingers hovered uselessly above his keyboard, caught between the duty to help a guest and the unspoken command not to intervene. "We have certain standards here," Margaret said, speaking slowly, each word deliberate. "You might find yourself more comfortable at a place that is less particular." The sentence landed like a verdict. It was not a suggestion. It was a dismissal. A door slammed shut before it had ever been opened. Behind Keanu, the lobby had gone quiet enough to hear the piano clearly now. A man in expensive Italian loafers and a cashmere sweater muttered just loud enough for the nearby guests to hear. Probably wandered in off the street looking for the bathroom. Quiet laughter rippled through the space. Knowing laughter, shared laughter, the kind that said everyone was in on this joke together and Keanu was the punchline. He did not respond to the comment, did not turn around. Instead, he reached slowly into his jacket and pulled out a card. The card was matte black, heavy, the kind of weight that only comes from metal rather than plastic. He placed it face up on the counter. American Express Centurion. The kind of card that cannot be applied for. The kind that comes only by invitation. Margaret glanced at it. Her smile did not waver. Anyone can get a fake these days. The words hung in the air. Even Daniel flinched. Even some of the guests nearby shifted uncomfortably, suddenly uncertain whether they were witnessing confidence or recklessness. But Margaret was already reaching for the radio beneath the counter. Her finger pressed the button with practiced efficiency. "Security, we have a disturbance in the lobby. Please escort this individual out." 2 guards appeared from the corridor within 30 seconds. Steve was tall with short blonde hair and broad shoulders. Marcus was stockier with a dark buzz cut and watchful eyes. Both wore charcoal suits with earpieces. Both had expressions trained to show nothing. They walked with measured steps, calm and professional. They had done this before. It was part of the job. Steve gestured toward the exit. Marcus placed his hand lightly on Keanu's shoulder. Keanu did not resist, did not argue, did not demand to speak with someone higher up. He simply began walking toward the door, his pace unchanged, his posture controlled, his hands visible at his sides. As he passed through the lobby, he heard everything. The whispers that grew louder now that the threat was being removed, the camera clicks from phones that had been waiting for this moment. The satisfied murmurs of guests who felt their judgment had been validated. Someone near the bar said clearly, "That is what happens when you try to fake your way into places you do not belong." One of the guards, Marcus, leaned close as they approached the door. His voice was barely audible, meant for Keanu alone. "Sorry, sir. Something does not feel right about this. We are just doing our job." Keanu said nothing in return, but he filed the words away. Marcus had apologized. Marcus had expressed doubt. In a building full of people who had shown certainty in their cruelty, one man had shown uncertainty. That mattered. The revolving door turned. The night air hit Keanu's face. Behind him, the golden light of the lobby continued to glow, warm and welcoming for everyone except him. Inside, Margaret stood near the reception desk with her arms crossed, watching like a director, satisfied with her final scene. An older guest walked over and extended his hand. "Good call," he said. "Cannot be too careful these days." Margaret accepted the handshake with a small nod. "That is exactly right. We have a reputation to protect." Behind that desk, invisible to Margaret and her admirers, Daniel Cooper sat frozen. His fingers hovered above the keyboard, trembling slightly. His heart was pounding in a way that had nothing to do with excitement. Something felt wrong, deeply wrong. The way the man had spoken. The calm in his eyes that never wavered. The certainty in his voice that seemed completely disconnected from the clothes on his body. The way he had accepted the humiliation without a single flash of anger. Daniel had seen people thrown out before. They argued. They pleaded. They threatened lawsuits. This man had done none of that. He had simply observed like a scientist watching an experiment unfold exactly as predicted. Daniel glanced at Margaret. She was deep in conversation with guests, basking in approval. He turned back to his screen and typed 3 words with shaking fingers. Reeves Foundation. Penthouse. The reservation appeared instantly. Confirmed. Corporate tier VIP status. A red flag at the top that Daniel had never seen before. Executive level clearance. Maximum discussion. Board notification required. Upon check-in, Daniel's stomach dropped. He opened a browser. Type quickly. The results filled the screen before he finished breathing. News articles from major business publications. Magazine covers, interview clips, and at the very top, a headline that made the blood drain from his face. Keanu Reeves through private equity fund completes acquisition of Grandview hotel chain in $380 million deal. The photograph showed the same face, the same beard, the same worn jacket, the same impossibly calm expression. Daniel whispered to himself, the words barely forming, "Oh my God, he owns this place." He looked up at Margaret, still smiling, still accepting praise, still utterly unaware that she had just thrown the owner of the building out onto the street, that she had called his black card a fake, that she had told him he did not meet their standards. Daniel's mind raced through the implications, the complaints he had seen filed and buried, the settlements he had heard, whispered about the staff members who had quit without explanation. The pattern that everyone knew existed, but nobody dared name. It was all about to come crashing down. 20 minutes. That was all the time Margaret had left. And she did not even know the clock had started. Outside, beneath the golden sign of the Grand View, Kenneth stood alone in the cool night air. He raised his phone to his ear. "Lisa, schedule a board call." 20 minutes. Sends the press release we prepared. And make sure someone is documenting every face in that lobby tonight. A brief pause on the other end. Then Lisa's voice, steady as always, understood. Are you okay? He considered the question. The humiliation still clung to him. Not because of the words themselves, but because of the silence that had followed them. An entire room of people had agreed without a single voice of dissent that a man in a hoodie did not deserve basic human respect. They had laughed. They had recorded. They had congratulated themselves on their discernment. I am fine, he said finally. I have been through worse. Lisa did not argue. She knew his history. She knew about the park benches in those early years. She knew about the losses that had nearly broken him. She knew that compared to those, a little humiliation in a hotel lobby was nothing. 20 minutes, she confirmed. Everything will be ready. Keanu ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket. For a moment, he simply stood there looking up at the building he now owned. He had not come here to be admired. He had come to see who people became when they believed no one important was watching, and they had shown him completely without hesitation. Now it was his turn. 20 minutes later the revolving door turned again. Keanu walked back into the lobby with the same steady pace, the same worn hoodie, the same canvas backpack. Nothing about his appearance had changed, but the room had transformed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. A wine glass hit its saucer too hard and cracked. Someone fumbled their phone, and it clattered to the marble floor. Heads turned not with judgment this time, but with something closer to recognition and fear. The news had spread. Social media posts were circulating. News alerts had begun pinging on phones throughout the building. Lisa had worked fast, exactly as she always did. Everyone in that lobby now knew exactly who the man in the faded hoodie truly was. Daniel could not breathe. His voice came out low, almost involuntary. He came back. He actually came back. Keanu walked straight to the reception desk. He looked at Daniel with eyes that held no accusation, no anger, just presence. I believe my reservation is still in your system. Daniel swallowed hard. The screen was still open in front of him. He nodded slowly. Yes, sir. Pen now suite. 3 nights confirmed. From across the lobby came Margaret's voice, sharp with indignation. What is he doing back in here? I thought I made it clear. She marched forward, heels clicking against the marble, eyes blazing with an authority she did not yet realize she had lost. Keanu did not look at her. He reached into his jacket, pulled out a black business card, and placed it gently on the counter. Silver letters caught the chandelier light. Keanu Reeves, founder and chairman, Reeves Hospitality Partners. Margaret stopped mid-step. The color drained from her face like water from a cracked glass. Anyone can print a business card, she managed, but her voice cracked on the final word. Keanu picked up his phone. Lisa, patch me into the boardroom. Speaker mode. Seconds later, a voice echoed through the marble lobby, clear and unmistakable.
I was protecting the brand. Then something happened that changed everything. From near the service corridor, a woman stepped forward. She wore a gray housekeeping uniform and a white apron. Her silver hair was pulled back in a low bun. Her hands were rough from decades of work. Her name was Betty. She had cleaned rooms at the Grand View for 23 years. In all that time, she had never spoken in front of guests. She had learned that invisibility was safety, that silence was survival, that people like her were not meant to have voices in rooms like this. But tonight, something had changed. She yelled at me once, Betty said. Her voice was small, but in the silence of the lobby, it carried like a bell in front of a guest. Called me stupid because I knocked on a door at the wrong time. When I tried to report it, I was told my job depended on keeping quiet. An older guest named Dorothy stepped forward from near the fireplace. She was well-dressed, elegant even, but her face carried pain that expensive clothes could not hide. "I had a suite booked here last spring," she said. "They called that morning and said it was under maintenance. But I know the real reason. I heard them say they needed the room for someone more appropriate. I did not look like the other guests." Daniel typed into the system. His voice was quiet but clear. Reservation history confirms it. Room was reassigned 2 hours later. No maintenance was ever logged. Margaret's voice broke. "I was protecting our image. That is what I was hired to do. Our reputation matters." Keanu turned to face her fully. His expression was not angry. It was not vengeful. It was simply clear. "You were hired to serve people, all people. Instead, you decided which people deserve to be served and which deserve to be humiliated. You built a system where your staff was afraid to speak, where guests were sorted by appearance, where discrimination was called standards." He paused. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, but somehow carried more weight. "I know what it feels like to be judged. When I first came to this city, I had nothing. I slept on park benches. I worked jobs nobody wanted. I lost my best friend to an overdose. I lost the woman I wanted to marry. I lost a child who never got to take a breath. I know what it feels like to walk into a room where everyone has already decided you do not belong." The lobby was absolutely still. Not a single phone was raised. "I did not buy this hotel to change the furniture. I bought it to change how people are treated when they walk through those doors. Because everyone who enters carries a story, and nobody has the right to decide their worth based on the jacket they are wearing." From the phone on the counter, Lisa's voice returned. "Termination file for Margaret Thornton is ready. Legal and human resources are standing by for your confirmation." Everyone expected what came next. The firing, the justice, the revenge that seemed not only appropriate but inevitable. Margaret stood trembling, tears forming in her eyes. For the first time in 7 years, she controlled nothing. Not this room. Not these people. Not even her own fate. Keanu looked at her for a long moment. Not with hatred. Not with triumph. With the eyes of someone who had carried too much grief to be indifferent to another person's unraveling. "Margaret." She looked up startled. It was the first time all night someone had spoken her name without contempt. "I could fire you right now. The paperwork is ready. The evidence is overwhelming. No one in this room would object. Many would celebrate." Margaret swallowed. She knew it was true. "But I am not going to do that." The words landed like thunder in silence. Daniel's eyes went wide. Betty gripped the arm of the coworker beside her. The guests who had been preparing to witness a professional execution found themselves frozen in confusion. Keanu continued, his voice steady but unexpectedly warm. "Because firing one person does not fix a broken system. And because I believe that people are capable of change if they truly want it." He stepped closer to Margaret, close enough that his next words carried the weight of absolute sincerity. "I do not know what made you this way. Maybe someone once treated you exactly the way you have been treating others. Maybe you learned early that power was the only thing that could protect you from being hurt. Maybe the world taught you that kindness was weakness and you spent your whole life building walls." A tear escaped Margaret's eye and rolled down her cheek. The first tear anyone in this hotel had ever seen from her. "I am giving you a choice. You will step down from your position. You will enter a 6-month program not as a supervisor but as a student. You will work alongside housekeeping, the valets, the porters, the security team, the people you never truly saw." He paused. "And 6 months from now, if those same people, not me, not the board, but the people you once dismissed, if they say you have changed, you will have a chance to return. Not to the same position, but to one you have earned." Nobody moved. The offer hung in the air like something impossible. Then Betty stepped forward. Slowly, the silver-haired housekeeper walked across the marble floor until she stood directly in front of Margaret. She looked her straight in the eyes and said something that nobody in that room would ever forget. "I do not forgive you because you deserve it. I forgive you because I deserve to let it go." Margaret collapsed inward. Not the crying of someone caught in a lie, but the crying of someone who had finally understood the weight of what she had done. Her shoulders shook. Her hands covered her face. "I am sorry," she whispered through her tears. "I am so sorry." No applause, no cheers. But something shifted in that room, quiet and enormous, like the first light of dawn through curtains that had been closed for far too long. Keanu nodded. Not with praise, with acknowledgement. An apology is the first step, but change is the journey. He turned to Daniel, to Steve and Marcus, to each person who had played a role in the evening. To Daniel, he offered the interim manager position, not as a reward, but as a responsibility. To the guards, he offered a reminder that conscience must always outweigh protocol. Then he stepped outside where cameras had already gathered. He gave only one statement. "I did not come here to fire anyone. I came to keep the people who deserve to stay. And I came to remind everyone, including myself, that the measure of a person is not the clothes they wear or the card they carry. It is how they treat people when they believe nobody important is watching." A few minutes later, Betty stepped through the revolving doors. She walked slowly toward Keanu and stopped a few feet away. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for doing what nobody else ever dared." Keanu looked at her, not above her, not through her, just at her, eye to eye. Then he gave a small, respectful bow. Cameras flashed from every direction. CEO and housekeeper, shoulder to shoulder, under the same light. That photograph traveled the world by morning. Not because it was dramatic, because it was true. In the weeks that followed, the grand view changed. A bronze plaque appeared near the entrance that simply read, "Dine does not arrive after you present your business card. It walks in with you the moment you step through the door." And somewhere in that building, a woman who had once believed that power was everything began the long difficult journey of learning that she had been wrong. Not because she was forced to, because someone had given her the chance to choose differently. And sometimes that is where real change begins. Thank you for following this story. Let us know in the comments below. If this story has moved you and you would like to stand with us in bringing more voices of truth and hope to light, please consider supporting our work. Even the smallest gift helps us continue creating and sharing these powerful stories. You can find the donate link in the description. And of course, do not forget to subscribe so you will not miss the next chapter we are preparing for.